Through Europe, toppling governments and redrawing the face of Europe. Many people believe that the present revolution in the Middle East is a similar planned event. Today we will investigate who's behind the demonstrations in the Middle East and what will the ultimate outcome be. Stay tuned for Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it. For some time, I have been suggesting that the revolution sweeping through the Middle East is very similar to the Velvet Revolution that swept through Europe in 1989. The ultimate result of that revolution was the fall of the Berlin Wall, the toppling of the governments throughout Eastern Europe, and ultimately the establishment of the New World Order. I also stated that this was a planned event. There's an article that just came out in the UN News. World faces epochal change equivalent to that of 1989. And the person saying that is none other than UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. So he is comparing the revolution sweeping through the Middle East right now to what happened in Europe in 1989. Now, many people believe that the New World Order was born in 1989. When I say many people, I'm talking about George Bush Sr., I am talking about Tony Blair, and many others have stated that there was an epochal change at that particular time. Now, if this present revolution is similar to that, then what will the outcome be? We're going to answer that on the program today, but before we do, I've made an assertion that the 1989 revolution was a planned event. It was not simply a spontaneous combustion. So, is this present revolution likewise being planned? If it is, who is planning it? Let's go back, first of all, to see if the 1989 revolution truly was planned. I want to run through some events of history leading up to the 89 revolution, some events that I think you will recognize. Back in 1962, the Pope John Paul the 23rd, no, pardon me, I misstated that. Pope John 23rd, the beloved Pope, noticed world trends. In 1942, 5% of the world was under communist control. The only nation on earth that was communist was the Soviet Union. 20 years later, by 1962, 50% of the world's population was under communism. Now, let's make sure that you get that point. 1942, 5% of the world under communist control. 20 short years later, 50% of the world was under communist control. The sweep of the red wave was so astounding that Henry Kissinger believed that the twilight of capitalism was here and the future belonged to Marxism. Well, when Pope John 23rd saw this, he had a decision to make. Do we try to fight this sweeping red wave of communism, or do we make an alliance with it? Now, since Catholicism is not given to democracy, Catholicism, of course, is the ultimate, it's the ultimate dictatorship, really. I mean, the Pope is not only the final voice in church matters, but he even is given the cloak of infallibility. I mean, can you think of any political leader on earth today who could claim infallibility, and yet the Pope does that? So Pope John XXIII, looking for the direction that the church should take, was more comfortable with the totalitarianism of communism than he was with the messiness of having to muster together a majority for a democracy. So the decision was made. The church would be better off forming an alliance with communism rather than trying to join hands with a failed system. It looked like it was failing at the time, called capitalism democracy. So in 1961, he did something very unusual. He appointed a man, Mr. Agostino Casaroli, to build bridges between Catholicism and the communist world. Now remember that. 1961, he appointed Mr. Agostino Casaroli. Well, as time went along, we come to 1978. I'll never forget the year because I was driving through Chicago. There was a talk show on WBBM radio, and the guest was a man by the name of Malachi Martin. He was a Roman Catholic Jesuit priest. He also was a very prolific Roman Catholic writer. He taught in Vatican College for 6 years and was an intimate friend with Pope John XXIII. He had just written a new book, the title of the book, The Final Conclave. I had studied enough Roman Catholicism to know that a conclave was the election of a pope. When I heard the title of the book, written by a Jesuit priest, The Final Conclave, I immediately understood all the implications. So I listened intently. Well, Mr. Malachi Martin simply said in the interview that there were strong factions within the Roman Catholic Church that believed the next pope should be a communist because communism was sweeping the world. Now, he also stated that Pope Paul VI, who was pope at the time, was terminally ill. They knew he was going to die. Therefore, there was a huge struggle taking place behind the scenes in the church between the pro-Marxist forces and the forces that wanted to return the church to its spiritual role and get the church out of politics. So I went out and bought the book that day, and Malachi Martin wove his story of this huge struggle between Catholicism and communism. Now, in Martin's book, The Final Conclave, he painted a picture that the anti-communist pope, the spiritual pope, won the election. However, I was waiting to see what would happen. In fact, sure enough, Pope Paul VI died a few months later, and the election was held. Before I could determine whether the pro-Marxist pope won or whether the pope who wanted to return the church to its true spiritual mission won, before I could determine that, the pope died suddenly. Now, this pope was 65 years of age, reported in excellent health, and yet all of a sudden he's gone, just like that. Now, the Vatican said he had a heart attack. However, this man had had no heart trouble all the days of his life. So, knowing the struggle between communism and the spiritual forces of Catholicism that was going on behind the scenes, my radar was beeping, going off. Something's wrong here. Something is fishy about all of this. So I reserved judgment. Well, about 3 months later, let's stop a minute. So immediately the church called another conclave. Of course, they can't do without a pope, so they all the prelates march off to the Vatican again, and they go into the conclave at the Sistine Chapel, and they begin the deliberations, and in a couple of days, the smoke came out of the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, which the white smoke indicates we have a pope. When the name was announced, no one knew who it was. Karol Wojtyla from Poland. Now, this was a stunning announcement for several reasons. Number one, the youngest pope in 154 years. Number two, He was the first non-Italian pope in 455 years. And number 3, and this was the kicker, he was the first pope ever from a communist country. Well, when I saw that, I thought, what's going on here? Well, about that time, there was a book published called In God's Name by David Yallop. And David Yallop contended that Pope John Paul I had been assassinated and that he had been replaced by Pope John Paul II. Well, since Pope John Paul II had ruled over the church in Poland for the last 40 years, and the church had not only survived but thrived. Now remember, John 23rd said the church was going to have to make an accommodation with communism in order to survive. Well, here's this man that had ruled hand in hand with communism in Poland for 40 years and been highly successful at it. Well, it looked like now the church had its pope that could build bridges with communism. Now, the amazing thing about all this was it looked like the first pope that was elected was that person who was going to return the church to its true spiritual mission, get the church out of politics, and to avoid an alliance with atheistic communism. That's what it looked like. In the books by David Yallop and also another book called Pontiff that was published a short while later, in these books, they claim the Pope was assassinated. They actually said that on the day he died, he had issued 2 very critical and far-reaching orders. Number 1, Cardinal Cody of the Diocese of Chicago, it had come to light about a year prior to this that he had funneled over $1 million in church money to a woman in Florida. He at first claimed that she was a distant relative, but when the story really came out, she was apparently his mistress. Well, this new pope had given the order that day to disciplining Cardinal Cody, the powerful Archbishop of Chicago. Also, there was another big problem in the church. Mr. Paul Marcinkus was head of the Vatican Bank, and he was accused of corruption, so much so that the Italian government had issued an order for the arrest of Paul Marcinkus. Now, I'm talking about an arrest for the head of the Vatican Bank. Well, Marcinkus had avoided arrest by staying inside the walls of the Vatican, since the Vatican is a sovereign state. However, Pope John Paul I had ordered the removal of Paul Marcinkus that day. So it appears that Malachi Martin's man that would rid the church of corruption, discipline Cardinal Cody, remove Paul Marcinkus, it appeared that that was Pope John Paul I. But his moves were not to be tolerated. He never lived to execute them because he issued the orders that day, but they were never carried out. Instead, the Pope died that night. So this new Pope comes along, and he took the name Pope John Paul II. Well, the first year he was in office, 1979, according to Malachi Martin's next book, Vatican, he pulled his assistants together, and in his conversation, he said, "We are not going to threaten to bury socialism. We are going to tell the communists how to fix the problem that they themselves know will bury them. We're going to show them how to make socialism work." I'll continue the narrative as soon as we get back.
Endtime Ministries presents End of the Age, a 30-minute commercial-free TV show hosted by Irvin Baxter. Every Monday, End of the Age airs on the Church Channel at 9 p.m., Daystar at 10 p.m., and on TBN every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., all Central Standard Time. On End of the Age, Irvin depicts how modern issues like an establishment of a one-world government, the religion of Islam, a coming World War III, and more line up so clearly with Bible prophecies written over 2,000 years ago. To get tomorrow's news today, be sure to tune into End of the Age every Monday on the Church Channel at 9 p.m., Daystar at 10 p.m., and on TBN every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., all Central Standard Time. Visit endtime.com for more details or call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
The Bible prophesies about 4 great spirits